Hello, everyone. I hope you had a very nice holiday weekend and that you're raring to go now back into our class. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get things set up here. We are now in Module 7. And so here we are for Module 7. Let's look at our overview and objectives. So here, identifying the social and economic impact of entrepreneurs in society. Again, we're focusing on in this specific area. Also, identify to create value for others and record them in a journal. Now, that is the journal assignment that we're working on over this section of the course. And here we have our module level objectives, and we have our activities for this module. And then we have our assignments. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. So here for Module 7, we know we need to read the Creators Code Chapter 5, Network Minds. And now we're starting all in Startup, Chapter 7 through 12. The chapters are small, so I think you'll be fine, be able to get that done. All right, next we have the creative and critical thinking is what we're going to be working on today, as well as managing uncertainty and risk. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the resources here for each. We're going to start with creative and critical thinking. So our resources here is a brief video here from Adam Grant. Go ahead and take a look at that and see how this pertains. He speaks about original thinkers and creative thinkers and how people that rush, that shoot from the hip, can make very quick decisions and then may regret those decisions, or if they had a little more time to think it through, perhaps they would have come up with better or more thoughts, right? So, or the other end of that spectrum are procrastinators who wait till the very end to come up with solutions. And then, of course, your brain shuts down a bit and things don't really work as well, and you don't have as many opportunities to come up with ideas. So he does reference procrastination as a little differently from its actual definition, but just go ahead and take a look at it. I think it has some valuable insights to help. Next is a very brief excerpt from the Dead Poet Society, really good movie, excellent movie. And this has to do with being creative and expressing yourself in different ways, not necessarily writing a paper. Perhaps there are other ways to express yourself. And in this particular scene, fortunately, the instructor there recognized that student was very creative, but he wasn't creative in his writing. He was creative in his expression. So I think you'll enjoy that. So something we need to pay attention to in ourselves, how do we express our creativity? Some of you love to write. Others really don't like to engage in that much writing. It's a good skill, of course, to be a good writer, but that might not be the best creative way for you to express yourself. All right, so now let's go ahead and go into the slide deck for creative and critical thinking. Okay, so let's see, here we are. Just a moment here. And okay, so here's the slide. And so let's move on here to when we think about what we're working on, we're thinking about cognition, right? So creative, critical thinking, that has to do with our mind and how we think. And there are different types of thinking. One, convergent thinking is really what a lot of business schools are including today. They are looking at one answer to a problem. They're looking at zooming right in, convergent thinking, zooming into it, getting the details, finding out the ideas or the relevance, simplifying it, perhaps reassembling or reducing or adding to, whatever it may be, deductive thinking, and arriving at one answer. Okay, and then moving on. But that really limits our creative thinking, creative and also critical thinking, truly. Divergent thinking is a different way, and it's like the approach that we would like to suggest. A lot of entrepreneurs think along these lines, zooming out from the problem and taking a close look at it from the outside, rather than zooming in tight to find a single answer, zooming out, more of a bird's eye view, to take a look at smaller bits of the problem to break it down. And looking at, very wide and possibilities and other perspectives. Perhaps you can switch your thinking or your perspective, your view of the problem into another way, making unusual associations and having a broader interest to span your domain. So these are ways that you can think more creatively, and you're able to have better critical thinking skills by doing so. So what happens when you're divergent thinking? You're telling your brain to stop and consider other options and methods to solve a problem. All right, now we're going to look at reframing. So as it relates to convergent thinking, focusing on one problem, just going all the way through to the end. But we start at one point and working to find the solution. And so that's convergent thinking, just one problem, as we mentioned before. But here, divergent thinking is you're going to perhaps generate many solutions and make a decision as to which solution to choose. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So here, framing. So here's a framing example. Our problem, learning a new language is difficult. Okay, so what is our solution for framing this problem? It is making learning easier, okay. Train better teachers, it's another method, right? Solution, making better software, or maybe giving up learning altogether. So many students decide that learning is difficult, and it is, but it's a good thing for it to be difficult because it means you're learning, right? But some students just quit school because it is difficult, and they cannot get themselves in a position where they're just not ready to have that learning process take place. But giving up is really not the right answer, right? How can we find a good solution? So instead of framing, let's reframe. Let's take a closer look here. Same problem, learning a new language is difficult. Here, we're looking at reframing by perhaps we can start earlier, start learning earlier, making games for children so that they learn a new language, offering school programs, after school programs, gamifying learning, making it a really fun experience, making it like a video game. Okay, now abstract and specific. So we start with the abstracts. So here in this example, humans are populating the environment like never before. Okay, yes, true. Specific, we're going to be very specific. The oceans are being polluted every day. So we can see perhaps one has something to do with the other, but that's not what we're asking about. We're asking about what's the abstract that is a very broad general view and something very, very specific regarding our reframing. Okay, so we can look at identifying who, what, where, when, why, and how. Okay, so here, an idea of the abstract. The highest level of abstract in this particular example is like we're looking at humans. The human being is the highest level of abstract. Then we filter down our ladder of abstraction down to Jerry Garcia, who was actually the rock guitarist for the Grateful Dead. So that's the lowest level. This defines who this person is. Here, we start with a human, we go down the ladder of abstraction, an artist, musician, a guitarist, a rock guitarist, getting more and more specific until we reach one person. This is just an example, but it gives you an idea of how you can go down a ladder of abstraction on many items and hopefully involved in a business or business idea for you. So here, reframing, here are the 5 whys. So let's say you are working for an organization and a piece of equipment stops functioning. It's not working. It's a manufacturing facility. And so what would be the first question? Why did the machine stop? And it's, well, it's because there was an overload and the fuse blew, or the breaker tripped, right? So a fuse blowing is old school, right? We don't really have many fuses anymore. But anyway, so why was it overloaded though? That would be the next question, right? So we're going down the ladder of abstraction here. Why was it overloaded? Because the bearings were not sufficiently lubricated. Okay, so why was that? Why were they not sufficiently lubricated? Because the lubrication pump was not properly functioning, right? So it wasn't pumping sufficiently. Why was it not pumping sufficiently? The column of the pump was worn and rattled. Okay, but why did that happen? Why did it wear out? There was no strainer attached and metal scraps got in. So now we come down to the very bottom of our ladder of abstractions. We're like, okay, the strainer. So now we need to attach a strainer so this doesn't occur again. All right, so here's a reframing, and there can be multiple causes. So there may be more than one solution. Now, the idea of the manufacturing equipment that had broken down, we came down to the problem. But here, when we reframe, oftentimes we will have many solutions. So here, what causes a student to be successful in college, right? So we're looking at why. It could be having good instructors can help. It could be the number of hours spent studying for each course, or it could be something different. It could be a combination of things or something very, very different. And so the causes could change. Okay, let's look at, creative thinking, divergent thinking, or considering more than one option, which is usually very creative, right? So here is a nice summary of research here. We're looking at expertise, creative thinking skills, and motivation. Here, certainly to be an expert, you need to be knowledgeable about the topic. Creative thinking skills, flexible, imaginative, creative and broad scope of your thoughts. Motivation, if you have seen Dan Pink and his wonderful TED Talk on motivation, it's excellent. He goes into the topic of the carrot and the stick approach, where oftentimes money is not the main motivator. And then, as we mentioned before about the why, having the why, the passion of why you're involved in a business really drives and motivates you in your business. It's not the money comes. And so that should not be the motivator. Now, when we think about critical thinking, we can look at the P's model. And so we work in this space, looking at the P's model: P for problem, E for evidence, A for analysis, and S for solution. So it's a way to, structure and synthesize our thoughts to make an informed decision. So let's look at the P, the problem, right? It starts with creatively identifying some type of problem statement, right? Being aware of your surroundings and removing and identifying any type of assumptions that may be available. So you want to be very careful to be creative. You want to think broad terms with the problem. How does it affect maybe ethical issues, cultural issues, philosophical, scientific issues, economic issues, artistic. And this is just a small list. There may be many other issues that may pertain to that particular problem. So we want to be broad scope in our thinking. So here's an example. Children continue to contract life-threatening diseases that can be avoided through the use of vaccine. So why does that occur? Well, we have our list of issues that could be part of the problem, and we want to look at those closely before we go into the evaluation. We want to look at the problem very specifically. Next, when we move on to evidence, we want to sort facts from opinion. We want to look closely at facts and then just be mindful of opinions, but don't classify opinions as facts. And so we want to look at primary versus secondary sources. So primary sources are what we have collected ourselves. And so we have that primary data. Secondary data is what someone else has collected and reported on their findings. And we could look at that as well. And then, of course, findings and evaluating sources of information is the CRAP test. And there's a handout that explains the CRAP, C-R-A-P-P, and that explains it thoroughly. We'll go over that. Okay, so here are the components of CRAP. Currency is the information timely? Is it current? Is it relevant? Who is the authority? Are they credible? You know, knowing the sources of the information, is it accurate, reliable, truthful? And is it, what is the purpose, right? What is the purpose of the evidence? Now we move on to analysis. And I really like this, and I use this quite often. So what we're doing is really looking at what is most important and most urgent. So that is our number one block over here, where we're paying the most attention to that area first, okay? And then that's not to say we don't ever deal with low importance and low urgency. We do, but we need to categorize what we're doing first, and then we can manage the other areas. So now I had an employer, or my boss once had, and this was years ago, had given me an enormous amount of work to do and wanted it all done by Friday. So this was Monday. Here's everything that needs to be done. It was a list of like 8 different items. And I couldn't possibly get it done in a week. Everything was important and urgent to her. And so it had to be done by Friday. So what I did was I took each item, all 8 items, and I laid them in the boxes that I thought was the analysis for those areas. And then I brought the graph to her and showed her and asked her if she agreed or disagreed. And so she did. She made one change, but other than that, it was manageable for me to get everything done in the number one block by that Friday. And then I would move into block 2 for the following week. And this one would be the following week. And then this would be towards the end of that last week. So she could see that it wasn't possible to get all the work done. And then it made her reframe her thinking as to what, how to analyze what was most important and most urgent. So everything can't be important and urgent. So we need to prioritize. We need to think about cost benefits. Maybe you can do a pro-con list as well if you'd like. Impact on others, something to think about as well. And then if you need to get more evidence. Okay. So let's look at the solution now. So when we make a choice and we take action, they're 2 different things, right? So we want to think about, well, the choice that we make, how does that impact our opportunity cost? Our opportunity cost being that if we didn't choose a certain solution, and so what is the opportunity that is lost because we did not choose that specific solution? So something to think about. The best way that I find to combat this opportunity cost issue is I make a list of my choices. And so I think each choice through. And so if I select choice A, what will happen down the road? What are the ramifications of choosing A? And what other issues could come about or circumstances could come about as a result? And then I do that with each one to try to make a better projection as to what may occur. And that usually helps me with my opportunity cost. Okay, so we also certainly want to consider our commitment, time, energy, money, etc., and certainly our reputation. All right, so that is where we are with that particular section. So now let's take a look at managing uncertainty and risk. Well, I have a nice little video here regarding uncertainty and risk, climbing Mount Everest. This is Beyond the Edge. It's a trailer from a group that climbed Mount Everest. And then also at the top here, I have the CRAAP test. So you can download that, take a look at it. Just take a quick look here so I can show you what it looks like. And you can see the currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose, as we mentioned. All right, let's see. Go back. Okay, so let's work with our managing uncertainty and risk, and we'll go over that slide deck. So this is just one quick video in here for you, and then you have the CRAAP test that you can take a look at. All right. Okay, so here we are. Let's move on. So definitions, uncertainty is really an investment made with no guiding data. When you're uncertain, you don't know what is to occur. So you don't have any data to help you. Risk is an investment made with complete data. You have the data, but so you can make a prediction, right? So here, uncertainty, no data, risk, you have the data. The folks that climbed Mount Everest, they had the data, they had the maps, they knew where the base camp was, they knew everything, but it was still a risk, even though they had the data. Now, uncertainty is climbing a new mountain, not having any map of the mountain, not knowing where to go. That is complete uncertainty. So very different. So let's take a look. Oh, incidentally here, few decisions are made in either. It's sort of a blend oftentimes. It's not clear cut. But let's just take a look at this example. Calculate the odds of pulling a red ball from a bag below. When you have a bag that is closed and you cannot see into the bag, you're not sure which balls are red that you'd be able to pull out. So that's uncertainty, not knowing. We're here, if we have a translucent bag, it's open, and we can see where the red balls are. It makes it it still may be risky reaching in and grabbing those red balls, but you can see them, you see where they are, and you can get them. All right, so what is at stake, right? So investment in several different things, certainly time, and entrepreneurs really, they do invest a good deal of time in their business, certainly in the beginning. Oftentimes they'll invest their own money because a startup more times than not cannot raise funds in the very beginning. So some level of the entrepreneur's investment is typically needs to be included in the beginning. The energy, so you have time and energy are really the two catalysts involved in an entrepreneurial venture. And then there's some degree of funds involved, and then also reputation. So now, I don't like to put a lot of stake on reputation because a lot of entrepreneurs fail at what they're doing, but they've gained knowledge to move forward. So they may pivot their business, or they may start a totally different business. So reputation, I just don't want you to get hung up on the reputation thinking, oh, if I fail, my reputation will be at stake. Not really. I mean, look at so many entrepreneurs that have failed time and time again, and still they prevailed, and they came up with a really good product or service at the end. Several even. Okay, so here, the ability to predict the future, right? So we want to know how can we predict the future? And incidentally, a lot of entrepreneurs have that. They're more risk takers than uncertain situations that they face, right? So there is uncertainty and there is some risk, but it's never 100% of each, right? So here's an uncertain domain. Most entrepreneurs really do fall in here because that is just the way it works out. They find ways of thinking through what could happen in a certain scenario, and it helps them to moderate that risk some, right? So here, uncertainty in the risk domain. So here, in the context of a startup, you have the liability of newness, meaning that it's new, it's a brand new startup. You don't have anything to over time that you've collected and looked at. So it's all new, it's all brand new. So you start small and work your way up. An established company has a lot of formal routines and all sorts of codes of conduct and established information for employees, and often many employees. So here's a perfect example, Zipcar. When Zipcar began, it started with 6 very, very simple rules for its members, right? So here, report damage, keep it clean, no smoking, fill her up, return on time, pets and carriers, right? And they started with 3 cars. With McDonald's, for example, a large corporation, has 386 pages of an operating manual because they've been around and they know what the operation is all about at that particular point. In the beginning, you're not sure. You just need to put down what's really important in the beginning, and then you grow from there. So here, this is Eric Ries, author of the Lean Startup. A startup is a human institution. Here, we have that term institution, right? So think of this in terms of, what would this be? A startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. This would be an informal institution, wouldn't it? Right? It's not a formal institution. It's not a law. It is how people behave as entrepreneurs. They are able to create products and service under uncertainty, under uncertain conditions. So, and that really sums it up for the startup as it relates to uncertainty. The entrepreneur is one who bears and manages. Certainly you bear and manage, even if you're just the only employee, the uncertainty of bringing new products and service to the market. Again, here's Frank Knight, 1921, it's still uncertainty. You're working in this uncertain space where you're projecting and considering what may happen. So let's look at the odds of things occurring here. In this particular scenario, what are the odds that an NCAA senior athlete becomes an NFL player? So what we do is we just break it down. We start with, well, how many high school football players are there in the United States? Almost 1.1 million. And then of those, 6.5% of those will play football in college from high school, right? Which turns out to be about 71,000. The drop off from college to the pros is, it leaves a dramatic, only 1.2% of college level players will be drafted in the NFL. So 1.2%, it still is quite a bit, but here we can break it down for us when we're looking at what are the odds of something occurring. Now let's look at what are the odds of winning the lotto, or any lottery for that matter, that has 6 numbers, matching all 6 numbers for the big jackpot. All right. It is 1 in almost 23 million. All right. So the chances are very low. What are the odds of rolling a 7 with 2 normal dice? All right. So what are the chances there? 1 in 6 chance in rolling a 7. And here is the math to sum that up for you. What are the odds of rain, that it will rain tomorrow in Fort Myers or anywhere in Southwest Florida, right? Right now, I would say that it's a darn good chance that it's going to rain because we're in the rainy season now. So what do we do though? But we check the Weather Channel to see for sure. And that might not be for sure. Okay, what are the odds startups will survive 5 years from now? All right, so what do you think that might be? 5 years down the road, what's the percentage of companies that will actually survive? 50%. So we here at the School of Entrepreneurship at FGCU, we are here to help you. Even when you've graduated, you are still welcome to come back to the incubator, and we will help you to continue to grow that business. We want you to succeed. All right, here's another example of control, right? So we're on control here. Control outweighs prediction. So what is that situation here? This particular situation is U-Haul, a young couple. They started this company, U-Haul, in 1945, right after World War II, where people really wanted to DIY their own moving. They did not want to have to hire a mover. They wanted to do it themselves. And there wasn't anything available for people to put like this size truck that you can move your own personal belongings. And so there was a widespread need for the moving yourself, and which created a sharing economy business model. All right, control and agency. Let's take a look at this. So psychological control directly relates to the concept of psychology called agency. Let's take a closer look at this. Agencies, well, humans are very unique compared to animals. We can, make our own decisions, and we can, that generate our behavior, right? So we are the decision maker. Even when the future is uncertain, we still can think through and predict what may happen. And it may turn out that way, it may not. If we have failed, well, that's okay. We can pivot or we could change course. The psychology of agency is one of self-efficacy. So when we look at this here, people's belief about their capabilities to exercise control over events that affect their lives. So it is their belief about their capabilities to exercise control over the events that affect their lives. That is a certain degree of confidence that somebody would have to have this belief, right? So you want to think of it in terms of self-efficacy. I'm in control. I have the capabilities that affect my life. I have the confidence to control that. Forethought, consider this, enables people to predict, making hypotheses about the occurrences and events and create the means for exercising control. Again, here is control. So we can predict, we can think in the future of what may happen if we decide to take one route compared to another. And so we have the control to make that decision. And then self-regulation, people's exercise of judgment and self-monitoring for gain in the future, often over actions taken in the present. So I look at my own, I monitor what I'm doing and how I can make improvements to have more gain in the future. for whatever that may be. It could be financial gain, but it could be other types of gain. And oftentimes it is other types of gains that wind up with a financial gain. So when we look at entrepreneurial self-efficacy, right, again, it's the confidence that you have the control to make those decisions. Entrepreneurs tend to rate themselves very high in self-efficacy. They are, they are confident in their ability to move forward, even if it doesn't work. You still have that high level of confidence. So that's very common with entrepreneurs. And so they are very intentional, and that affects their behavior, of course. It moves them forward. Now here, we mentioned becoming an expert. The expert is part of creative thinking, right? So it really does require intense work. Here, the example, Michael Phelps, I think he won 5 gold medals. Wow, that's how do you become an expert in this particular area, the skills area, right? He was very goal-directed in his behavior, self-monitoring his own thoughts, emotions, behavior. And he swam 6 hours a day, approximately 8 miles of swimming 6 days a week. And he was very committed to that regiment. He was consistently monitoring his performance, just making small incremental improvements on his timing day after day or week after week. And a body and mind development through that practice, that grueling practice, and the total belief that he will keep improving. So the more you do, the more he's practicing, the more he's improving, little incremental, 1 second is a huge improvement. And then the next week, another second. So over time, it is significant. Okay. Deliberate practice. So when we think about how many hours are we involved in something, right? So we saw Michael Phelps, lots of hours. If anyone out there plays golf, you need to play golf a lot to become good at it. And even so, look what happened to Tiger Woods this past week, right? So he dropped out of the Open because he didn't perform well, and he had been a star and had done exceptionally well. But, that deliberate practice over and over and over again. And you're really playing, when you're playing golf, you're playing against yourself, right? Even though you may have a foursome that you're playing with, you're not playing against them, you're playing against yourself. All right, let's walk entrepreneurial expertise. So what skills would make an entrepreneur an expert? So there are several important skills that we think about. Certainly interviewing potential customers, that's very huge on our list. So we're at the top of our list, because if you don't have potential customers, you don't have a product or service. You need to be sure that you have something that's saleable. So we want to be sure that you have potential customers that are interested in your product or service. Forming win-win partnerships with others. And that could be true partnerships, or they could be pseudo partnerships. They could be outsourcing resources. It can be many different ways of partnerships. Making small initial investments. That's part of it. Giving presentations. You need to be able to pitch your product, 1, to potential customers, and 2, to possible investors. So giving presentations are important as well. Inspiring others. It can be customers, employees, many different groups. And negotiating contracts too is another important skill. Hiring and firing employees. So hiring is a lot of fun. You're growing and you're hiring new employees, but firing them is a little more difficult. I found that I have fired many employees, and I find that when I see that they're not a good fit for the organization, they know it as well. And we can have a conversation on really what is the best thing for them. So firing them, I don't really like to use the word firing, it's letting them go, or letting them go to an organization that is a better fit for them. So that is what, sorry, here we go, disturbance. Okay, so that is a good method to consider if you when you're going to let someone go. So entrepreneurial expertise, uncertainty. So we don't necessarily know what we need. We may not know everything that we need, but we're still willing to go into that space to see what happens next, right? So we want to practice, we want to manage our uncertainty, and a lot of it absorbs and just comes about over time. So sometimes those uncertain conditions make it difficult to take action, but we want to find ways to manage our uncertainty so that we have some just simple rules that can help guide us. Those simple rules that Zipcar had early on can be very helpful. So we have those simple rules. We can think about boundary rules, like making decisions between options, ranking our priorities, right? So we mentioned that earlier. The how-to rules, what are the basic processes involved? They don't have to be detailed like 365-page operation manual, but some basic processes that are needed. And coordinating rules as well. You know, how do people work together? Timing rules, when are certain actions, when should they take place? Exiting rules, when do you stop a certain course of action? And that can be maybe a new product development that is not working out. At what point do you stop putting assets into that and reverse it? Because as new products come out from many businesses, they find that maybe 3 new products will come out, and really maybe only one of them will really survive and do well, and the other 2, so you need to have an exit rule for new products as well. So here are some simple rules for entrepreneurs to consider is, well, what product or service are you going to create? What will the feature include or exclude? And how to hire employees, which partnerships to form, many different choices there. What customers to target, that's very crucial because you need to target that customer and you need to know who that customer will be, who will buy your product or service. Distribution channels to use, key activities that you want to prioritize, and what are those key activities? So this is a partial list. I think I might have, no, it goes on and on. So the list goes on. We have an exercise business model canvas in this course that hones in some of this information, but that is it for this section here, managing uncertainty and risk. So now we look at our assignments. Please complete module 7 for the exam 2 review sheet so that you can keep that current and moving forward, so you're not overwhelmed with completing that list just before the exam. Assignment 4, this is, you're working on that opportunity journal, so please update that from the information from module 7. That is due in the next module, which is this, that will be due this weekend. And here is a midterm survey of instruction. Please take this survey. It has a few questions. It won't take you very long. I think about 5 minutes will all it take. Answer what you think about the course so far. Are there changes you would like to see? How is it going for you? So please, really, it's a anonymous survey, so I don't know who is saying what. So if there's something you don't like, please let me know, because I would like to improve the course and make it the best it can be. All right, and that is it. So later this week, we will go into effectuation, and we will go into module 8, 9, and 10 for effectuation. And we are good to go. So best wishes on this work for you, and I'm looking forward to your assignments. Thank you.